Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And you guys know my custom here is to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things that are very precious. Time. That commodity, when one becomes a lover of time, when one appreciates time, the value of time, when one hugs it and kisses time, you will see a valued life. When one does not understand that, they will misuse it, and we can see from their life the result. The other is the journey. The journey houses some powerful stuff because it created the individual who they are today. And we are absolutely honored to have Teza come here and share both of these precious stuff with us. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for this beautiful invitation. Every single cell in my being is vibrating with just being excited about the privilege of sharing with you, Ken, and with anybody who's listening. It's my honor to share where I'm at right now and also the journey. The journey is so important and so ubiquitous. We all are on the journey. All of us.
All of us, every single one of us. And I'm glad that you're here because we have to go through the journey to become designers of our life or creators of our life. And so I am excited to have this conversation with a fellow creator. Tell us, how do you serve others? How do you serve mankind in your capacity right now?
Right now, I call myself a spirit activist, and I do that by writing books, sharing my journey intimately, blow by blow. And I've always been a writer and an artist. And so I serve by basically not just producing these things myself, because the publishing world, the so-called authorities, the people in charge, the timekeepers, the clock punchers, they don't want to have anything to do with somebody like me. So it's very difficult to be a self-published author. And I'm getting ready to present, to me, the most important book of all, which is a magical story about how Great Mother herself comes to guide us through the darkness. But all the preceding books were various facets of my life. Not so much documenting the early trauma, but from the point where I stepped into the light, which for me meant recovery from addiction 40 years ago.
Oh, congratulations. I tell people the darkness. The purpose of the darkness is to get you in touch with your creator, who has been residing with you from the day you came. But because you are not attuned to it being there, it has to create a way by which you can see it shine. And so the darkness comes so that you can see you shine, because you are that powerful. And not until, that's why I say to folks, do not learn to embrace it, because it is here for a purpose, to teach you who you are. One of our customs here is to go back into our childhood, because it is usually the first space by which we reside for a little while. We call that little while years. So we are here with a set of folks that are traumatized as well, and they see the world through their trauma and their limitless thinking or beliefs or whatever it is. But they are now going to begin to teach us, or in other words, program us with data that they have accumulated in their life. Invite us to your family. What was that like?
It was horrendous. And I ran away. I ran away since I was an infant. I was always running away, because when I finally did have a realization and consciousness, I said, what am I doing in this family? It was totally alien to me. and I was considered a freak,
Yeah.
and their trauma became my trauma. Of course, that's what happens in the family unit. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, my soul chose this family. We
Yeah.
all do. We
Hmm.
make an arrangement. However, we do that, I do not know. I'm not one of
Yeah.
these astral traveling people. I'm not interested in that. I stick to the here and now.
Yeah.
But the childhood I had was, um, I'm making peace with it. I'm making peace with it. But
Yeah.
there was not just trauma, but there was alcoholism
Hmm.
and there was abuse. And I just kept running away until finally I could successfully run away,
Yeah.
even changing my name, disassociating.
Yeah.
And it is the subject of the next book I'll be writing after I publish this novel that I'm getting ready to. So I have no problems revealing the trauma, but it's nothing different than anybody else's trauma.
No, I
Really, it's
think
like
the
my
trauma.
trauma is better than your trauma.
No, one of the things I try to tell people about trauma um, is that it comes in so many different forms, but it gives birth to us in this way that once we are traumatized from whatever and however it happens, it began to cause you and I to perceive others and the world and even ourselves from that trauma. And we began to program us with the limitations because of the trauma. I am this, I am less than, I can't do this, I can't, I am that, and all this stuff. And so we began to program ourselves from the trauma. And then as we move through life, that great day of the visitation, I call it, when things happen, it says, let's talk about the
Hmm.
trauma. So here you are, you were running, as you said,
Hmm.
and coming back and running and coming back. That in itself creates a great deal of trauma. How did this woman, this young child, interpret to herself the going and coming back and seeming in her mind, I can't get out of this, but I'm going to keep trying? How did
Hmm.
she
Well,
manage that?
I am the jokester. I
Yeah,
am born under the sign of Sagittarius, and we're called the cosmic clowns of the universe. And if something is not fun, I don't want to do it, or else I will make it fun. So
yeah,
even running away became a game,
yeah,
and it was my way of outfoxing my captors. I'm not
yeah.
going to go into any juicy details about my trauma.
No,
If
no.
you're waiting for that, you better read my books.
I'm all about
It's because
it.
I sincerely believe that there is no one person who has more trauma than the other. We're
No,
given exactly the right kind of trauma that we need, or the experience. I call them challenges. I don't use the word
yeah,
trauma, because to me everything is a challenge, and trauma
yeah,
is something that people hang on to a lot. And
yeah,
I've heard so many people, because I'm in 40 years of recovery. I hear people who hang on to their stuff. Even after 40 years, they're what they call romanticizing how nice it
oh,
would be
yeah,
to get high, how nice it would be to
yeah,
just, wipe out and get drunk. Well, that's hanging on to trauma. But to me, a
yeah,
challenge is like a beautiful mountain, like Ken is mountain, in Chinese. I'm a big fan of the I Ching. Ken is the
yeah,
mountain. You know what it's like to climb to the heights.
yeah,
And so I see the so-called trauma, the challenge of my childhood being, I was thinking about it last night as I was doing my yoga practice. What would my life be like if I hadn't had parents that just seemed like they were there to, like, you know, kill my spirit? They were doing whatever they could to kill my spirit, telling me I'm
yeah,
insane, telling me I can't do my creative juice thing, because I've always been into just creating, and usually
Yeah.
making a mess, starting a fire in the garage because I
Yeah.
wanted to see what fire was like, and, writing on the walls, but using it as my chalkboard. I never played with dolls, but I wanted to share with them my knowledge. So I'd line them up and, and, and do things like that. But I can tell you, the most extraordinary thing about my childhood today that I remember is what I find out from my parents in adulthood about what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
The little knowledges that you get, the little hits of knowledge about what motivated them
Yeah.
and things that were occurring that made them who they were. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, my parents actually had a visit with a UFO. There was a
Wow.
spacecraft that came to our little tiny house in Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
Nowheresville, Illinois. It was a suburb outside Chicago. And they, of course, did not tell us this because we were children inside the house playing at the time or watching TV, howdy doody,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And later on in life, when I was told this, I said, well, maybe that explains why I too have been visited with
Yeah.
UFO extraterrestrial events. So
Yeah.
the interconnection of everything is so fascinating. And in this day, for me to visit my childhood, when I spent a few moments, last night, thinking, what would my life be like if I had had parents who said, "Oh, you are just a fabulous child.
Yeah.
You can do anything. You can go to the moon if you want." It made me sad. I
Yeah.
started crying and I said, wow, who could do that to a child?
Yeah.
But yet they were very nice people. They just didn't know better
Yeah.
because that was the limitation of their awareness, because I did
Yeah.
not fit into their pattern. And because my spirit had to be this rebellious kind of, new thinking
Yeah.
person, even as a child. So I had to have the trauma. I had to have the challenges. I embraced them. I blessed them.
Yeah.
But as a parent myself, I'm a stepmom, and our adult children are now giving us grandchildren.
Yeah.
I would never, ever tell a child what my parents told me, ever.
Yeah.
And I would never treat them the way they treated me. If I didn't finish my meal, I was sent to the basement
Yeah.
and told not to come out of this dirty, dingy, moldy basement until I had eaten liver and all that, Brussels sprouts and stuff that kids hate. And so what did I do? I found a hole somewhere and just put everything into the hole
Yeah.
until eventually I was found out. And I always was very creative about getting out of my punishments.
Yeah.
And it came in
Mine
handy as
is,
an adult when I got the big punishments, from
yeah.
society. That's when the story gets really interesting. Talk about trauma. Childhood was nothing compared to the trauma I inflicted on myself
Yeah.
in early adulthood.
Yeah. There's nothing like the trauma we inflict on our own selves because it
Mm.
is, yeah, I've been there and mine was, and I don't get a chance to talk much about mine because I
Oh,
am the
do
one that is
tell, Ken. What was your
interviewing.
trauma
I
as an adult?
remember as a young one, a young boy, I made a statement to my grandfather because he was grew up in the country, and I would go visit him in the country in the summers because I just love the farm. I love being in nature and all of that stuff. And so one day I said to him that I'm so hungry I could eat all of that food that he had cooked, and it was a big pot of food. And I was probably about 8 or 9. He made me eat the whole thing.
Just because you
And
said that?
just because I said that. And so
Oh, dear.
I remember the pain.
Mm.
You couldn't sit. I couldn't lie. I couldn't.
Mm.
It it was an intense lesson that
Mm.
I was taught And so there are
Hmm.
many of those type things going on.
Okay,
So
what
I
was the
understand.
lesson though? Was the lesson like, I don't get it because that was cruel. I don't
Yeah,
get
it's
it.
absolutely
Tell me the
cruel.
lesson.
What I named one of my sons after him in order to it for me it transitioned me into the space of absolute total forgiveness, that I was
Hmm.
able to name my son after my grandfather, because that name would be mentioned every day. And so I remember that journey. The lesson was, it formed me, it began to make me, um, uh, I became a rebel, an
Hmm.
intense rebel. I mean, and I would say the same words: I am not going to allow you to break me. You
Hmm.
can try as much as you want, but you'll never succeed. And what it did to me mentally, it made me strong as this young kid growing up
Hmm.
who was never normal like the others. And
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
understand parts of that. So here you are, this young girl,
That's beautiful.
experiencing and expressing her world in art. Art becomes her expression. She looks at the wall and see images and begins to express it, and all the family looks at that child and say, "Wow, what a special child!"
No
And this
way.
kid, I know,
No. Who are you
I know,
talking
they,
about? Not me.
yeah, yeah, they're giving you all kinds of names that they're calling you. Special is just it. So here you are, you're learning and soaking up all of that. Uh, how did you um, hold it together, if you will, as you're moving through in this family? How did this young kid hold it together? Because you still got to hold it together, even though all the madness is happening around you, and you have to figure a way how to manage your world within that
Mhm.
madness, the tornadoes of life, if you will.
Well, it was a very short period, but I was a teenage alcoholic. And that was the only
No.
way I could get through it because my parents were
Yeah.
both in that world and I just outdid them.
Yeah.
And I I got into acting out
Yeah.
and never got caught because that came later in life.
Yeah.
When you finally get caught
Yeah.
by either God, the
Yeah.
forces that control the universe, or the law,
Yeah.
put in prison, which would
Yeah.
happen to me. Every single thing I did in my life leading up to that event, when I got caught and had to pay the
Yeah.
price, was written invisibly on the walls of my third world prison cell where I was
Yeah.
captured. But as a teenager, I was very foxy. Nobody ever caught me. Mm-mm. Nobody ever caught me. Even after I
Yeah.
stole my parents' car. I mean, we're talking about underage, 14,
Yeah.
15, because they were so busy in their addictions. Anybody who's a kid in an alcoholic home knows that, you can do anything you want because your parents are just out of it.
Yeah.
And that's not a pretty thing.
Yeah.
So, and you talk about like making art. And by that time, I didn't know how to do it because I was told, don't you ever think about doing art. That's a waste of time.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You have to get a job. You have to earn money. You have to raise a family. You can't do something so stupid make art. So I was never given any encouragement about that at all.
Yeah.
So the rebel was going to college, thinking I was going to be a lawyer,
Hmm.
following the course that my parents had set me, and proceeding to get expelled because I
Yeah.
was an alcoholic freshman.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what
Wow.
alcoholic freshmen people do. They get themselves expelled. But
Yeah.
the forces that be brought me out of this little dinky town that I had been in when I went to college to the big metropolitan city of Boston.
Yeah.
And the college that I got expelled from was right next door to the Museum of Fine Arts,
Yeah.
which became my temple, my
Yeah.
happy place. I spent every moment there. I absorbed that museum. If anybody has been there, they know that they have the best collection of Eastern art,
Yeah.
including Buddhas from ancient places. The Buddha room is a massive, huge temple that most people don't even know about. It's deep in the bowels of the
Wow.
museum. And I just found myself. I realized that I was an artist by
Yeah.
surrounding myself with beautiful, world-class, high-quality art.
Hmm.
With the ancient stuff struck me just as much as the Impressionists did, and the modern, and the sculpture, and the paintings. And that was my teacher. My teacher was the walls of the
Yeah.
Boston Museum of Fine Arts. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go for it. And
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, without having had any training, except as a kid, I was always copying Superman, copying even my dad's Playboys that I found in the
Yeah.
closet. I was an expert copier, and I decided I was going to go to art school,
Yeah.
never having had an art lesson. And this was a very prestigious art school, and I did earn acceptance right away just based upon what they call draftsmanship. I could copy
Yeah.
anything because I'd been copying things as a kid secretly. Every
Yeah. Yeah.
encyclopedia, getting in trouble as a kid because, oh, I traced the bird. Well, you wrecked the bird for everybody else using the bees and, Britannica Encyclopedia. So my parents had to pay the price because I was doing things like that.
Yeah.
That's how I began to be an artist, by being the rebel. And I think, the true artistic spirit is you have to be what normal people call either insane
Yeah.
or a rebel. You can't be a normal person, one who abides by the rules, if you're either going to be an artist or a spiritual seeker. And I happen to be
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, you can't because you're not normal.
No, we're
So,
not normal.
and if you're
No.
not normal, they don't know how to deal with someone like that. And so that's where all the name calling, all the abuse um, just perpetuates. And because you are absolutely a nonconformist according to their programming. So here you are, you in class, nothing that we do in life is just happenstance. I always tell people, oh,
Hmm.
here's this little girl tracing and copying things, and now she's able to enter into a prestigious place, college, based on her copying as a little young child. How
Yeah.
did you feel when you got accepted and you know that you're about to walk into something that is deep inside you that got lit up while you were looking at the walls, if you will?
I had the same feeling yesterday. It's amazing when you know you're getting a
Yeah,
strike of blessing.
yeah,
The, call it fate or destiny. You just know. I had that feeling yesterday because I'm getting ready to publish a book, and I just got a huge endorsement from my writing hero, the man
wow,
who wrote Life of
beautiful.
Pi. If you know
Yes,
that
yes,
story,
yes.
Life of Pi.
Hmm. Yes,
So when I was accepted, well, it didn't stop my drinking.
yeah.
But I said, whoa, this stuff works. Let's have some more tequila.
Yeah.
No, I just like, whoopee, I get to be with all the other freaky people
Yeah.
who don't dress right and don't look right. And I am a very tall person, and I was wearing my hair very short at the time and wearing pea coats and
Yeah.
jeans. And those were the days when I would go by Wentworth, which was an institute for technology, to get to the
Hmm.
school, and they would throw water balloons at me and say, "Are you a boy or are you a girl?" And really, I would get razzed so
Wow.
much because of just my physical.
Yeah.
I was in the subway once, and some guy, it was the Vietnam days, and he hands me a book of matches, and he said, "Here, go burn your draft card," because he thought I was a guy
Wow.
avoiding the draft, just
Yeah.
being I never used the word hippie, but those were the days.
Yeah.
Leary and Alpert were
Mm-hmm.
just doing their thing with
Yeah.
acid and Harvard
Mm-hmm.
Square, and there I was in Boston. Guess who was in Harvard Square with them? So my education dove into psychedelia
Yeah.
pretty rapidly, and I was just having a great time. It was really fun
How
to
did
be
that?
to be a wild child in the 60s.
How did that help with your growth? Because I know of people that when you're in the with psychedelics and stuff like that, if one understands the purpose of it, and I know Larry and those guys, eventually they headed that direction when they
Especially Baba
were,
Ramdas, Richard
yes,
Alpert. Yeah,
hmm
he he
they
he and
began to
I.
become purposefully
Yeah,
doing that. And how
yeah.
was those experiences? Because those are more intense and they are more enlightening. If
Well, you
you,
got to start somewhere, Ken. You got to start scrubbing out the shit. I had a lot of shit to scrub out.
uh,
No, I did. At that
yeah,
time, when I dove into the psychedelia thing, I really thought I had become insane because I had
yeah,
recurring nightmares because
yeah,
of the abuse that happened to me as a child. And it
yeah,
was just like horrendous. I didn't want to go to sleep because, it was reenacted in my subconscious. And I would experiment to see if there was at least some place during the daytime where I could take a little nap and I wouldn't
yeah,
be plagued by these horrendous nightmares. I mean, just chilling nightmares where you wake up just crying and your bed is
yeah,
wet because you're crying. And so I was just getting ready to knock on the door of the local loony bin, which was called, I forget the name. Anyway, so, and then somebody said, "Oh, here, try this."
yeah,
And in those days, that was like 66 or something. This
yeah,
was before I got into meditation. Because
yeah,
meditation, I was in the first wave of the TM people, like
yeah,
67, 68, but 66, I was, somebody actually slipped acid into like the punch, that proverbial
yeah,
thing that
yeah,
is really a nasty thing to do.
to do,
But that
yeah,
was my first introduction. And it does change people's minds. I mean, just like
yeah,
the book, Change Your Mind,
hmm,
recently documented with microdosing and everything.
yeah,
If somebody
yeah,
asked me today, well, what do you think about people using psychedelics? I would say, hey, if you're really stuck, do whatever you can to get unstuck as fast as you can,
yes,
because the celebration of the joy of the magic of life is so waiting for you once you
yeah,
get over that block. And I was one of those. I,
yeah,
I wasn't thinking about suicide, but I definitely thought I was ready to commit myself. And
yeah,
instead, I dove into psychedelia.
yeah,
And not for very long, because there's something about acid where it really does change the cells of your brain. And after a while, I started seeing people's bones. I mean,
yeah,
I was seeing through their skin. So it's not something to take too much of. And I would
yeah,
never tell anybody to do it without really understanding the severity of that choice. It's a
yeah,
pretty severe choice.
yeah. I remember one of my teachers, if you don't understand the purpose of a thing, you will abuse that thing. And so
Yeah.
there's some wisdom there. And
And there's
so
that
there,
famous story of Baba Ramdas, when he was
yeah.
Richard Alpert
Hmm.
in that his book, that famous book he
Yeah.
wrote. So he's there meeting his guru, and the guru said, "What you got in your pocket?" And Richard at that time had about 300 hits of acid or something, and Bhagwan Rajneesh said, "Give me what you have," and Albert gave it to him, and we just like took all of it. Do you remember
Yeah.
that story?
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't affect somebody
Doesn't
who's
do
in that
anything.
sublime state.
Yeah. It didn't do anything to him.
No. Be Here Now. Be Here Now. That's the name of the book.
Yeah.
I still have a copy of it. I love it.
Yeah, it is. I know people that do take it today, and I tell them, I explain it to them this way. It is an elevator that will get you to your destination faster than other ways. But it must be purposeful. You have to understand that there's a cost to it. So when you take the elevator quickly, there's a cost. But when you investigate the cost and where you're at,
Right.
what is more important for you. But some people need to have that,
Right.
because especially those that are with the alpha mindset, that always their mind is not able to calm down, and
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to uh, uh, rationalize your
Mm-hmm.
fingernail, the rate of the growth on your fingernail. So those type folks. And so
Yeah.
here this girl is, this woman now, experience all this trauma and still have the alcohol and testing all the psychedelia stuff, and she is experiencing a new powerful lifestyle, if you will. What was happening to this woman there?
Oh, that was my crucifixion. That was the
Yeah,
death of the previous, like, little girl from the suburbs who was
yeah,
supposed to wear pretty clothes and get married to a guy who had a
yeah.
nice job and
Hmm.
take care of kids and everything. That was the death. That was my crucifixion.
Yeah,
And I was transforming into the butterfly. I was in the caterpillar stage
yeah.
and enjoying myself immensely.
Yeah,
Even when I had to face my demons.
yeah.
And I want to say one more thing about, for anybody who's contemplating using psychedelics, there is always a gamble that you will not come back from
Yep.
that elevator trip. We
Yeah.
all know victims
Yes.
of those days, and so
Yeah.
and I know somebody who's taking microdoses of acid right now, and he's stuck. You know, you can
Yeah.
get stuck
Yep.
microdosing. If you
Hmm.
just want to get stuck, just pick anything. You can get stuck
Yeah.
and not move. But life is movement,
Yeah.
constant movement,
Yes.
constantly shedding
Yeah.
old,
Yeah.
constantly metamorphosing into something
Yes.
more beautiful, more outrageous, more
Yeah.
free, more joyous.
Yeah. When you get stuck, I've been to water places where water is stagnated.
Mm.
That's what stuck looks like.
It's very dangerous. Yeah, they have these
Yeah.
microbes now that really are deadly. If
Yeah.
stagnant water here in Florida, where I live, you
Yep.
stay away from the stagnant water.
All
Hmm.
kinds of creatures coming out of there that are very deadly to you. So that's why I tell people, make sure that you don't uh,
Yeah,
become stuck, because
right.
it is very dangerous to be there. So as this girl is being given birth to, this new
Yeah,
individual, and
yeah.
she's now looking to her quote unquote future life. What
No,
was it?
no, I was still stuck in, like, I'm probably going to die before 21 because I was hell bent on my doing that. I was really, no, I was not looking for a future. I was at that point because I was an addict.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. I was stuck in addiction. I was not yet released
ready. Yeah,
spiritually,
yeah,
but I got released from suburbia, the
yeah.
parents,
Hmm.
and basically thumbed my nose at them. And, I had to do that. I had to
Yeah,
make a break. It wasn't pleasant, but I had
right.
to. So I was stuck in addiction, which is a terrible place to be in. Even if you
Yeah,
think you're having fun, eventually it turns on you.
yeah. Just like any
Addictions.
other monster always does.
Yes.
I became, and I would tell people this, I became an individual in my 30s because I became Ken Primus when an incident happened and I confronted my parents, and we split for that time, and I knew that once I made that encounter, that it would change our relationship forever. And when I did, I became Ken Primus, which I tell
Hmm.
people, and I did that in my 30s. And so we live to please mom and dad, or we try to live for them for some reason. And
Mm-hmm.
when we come to the space where we now are beginning to become an adult, you will feel that separation. It is really something else, because it's earth shaking, and but yeah, it's necessary for you to start your own individual journey. So you got released from mom and dad. How did this girl now begin to move and create this new life, and still is in arrested by alcohol and drugs and so forth? How did she begin to move forward in her life? Um, and what was the event that got you to the point where you now begin to introduce meditation into your life?
Okay, so we're skipping a big part where,
Yeah.
because I had this urge to not so much destroy myself, but to just peel away all the layers of what I was supposed to be, I became a sailor. I learned how to sail because in
Wow.
Boston, there's not just the Museum of Fine Arts, but there's Gloucester, which is the
Yeah.
famous fishing harbor.
Fishing over. Yeah.
And I learned how to sail in Gloucester
Yeah.
Harbor, hitting every single pier I could. And I said, wow, this is really fun.
Yeah.
And I immediately got a chance to go to the Caribbean. And I
Hmm.
stayed in the Caribbean for a whole decade. And
Wow.
I became a pirate, a she pirate,
I love this.
doing legitimate things now and
Yeah.
then, but doing a lot of illegitimate things
Pirate
because
things.
I
Yeah.
was that was part of my addiction.
Yeah.
And I eventually lived in smack dab in the middle of the Caribbean, which is Dominica, between
Yeah.
two French islands, Guadeloupe and Martinique.
Hmm.
And I spent years there with an inter-island shipping business of fruits and vegetables, and doing as many trips as I could on passing sailors. I sailed all different kinds of boats,
Yeah.
everything from tiny 20 footers all the way to Jamaica from the Caribbean, and big Faro cement boats that were made by some crazy guy up in the Alps. And he had to ship it down to the Med. And I mean, you meet interesting people. This was
Yeah.
not on my meditation path. This was
Yeah.
my adventure. I
Yeah.
was compelled to have adventure. And every
Yeah.
single thing I did, I'm now writing about and sharing those stories because they're incredible stories.
Yeah.
And the Caribbean in those days, that was all the 70s, was really no man's territory. Forget the resorts, forget those
Yeah.
fancy places that today you have to, have a passport and everything. But in the 70s, you could hop all around the islands just with a smile, go to the airport and thumb a ride to the next island, or hop on a local boat and just
Yeah.
get a bunk or sleep
Yeah.
on the deck. But meanwhile, I had a legitimate business that was shipping and organizing cooperatively the peasant type of farmers who were
Yeah.
living in the third world. Now, I was one of a handful of white people living on a totally black nation island, Dominica.
Yeah.
And so my life, I wanted to not be white. I wanted to not be a woman. I wanted to not be American.
Yeah.
Everything I had been, I wanted to not be.
Yeah.
And I could successfully do that because I left my terrain,
Yeah.
left my roots,
Yeah.
and I was accepted. I mean, all my West Indian friends called me a West Indian woman because I'm a West Indian woman. I lived with the Rastas in Jamaica. I
Yeah.
smoked the ganja until I fell off the cliff. And and eventually I did get caught for
Yeah.
some mischief that
Yeah.
I wasn't even personally involved, just because of my association. So I did spend time in prison
Yeah.
in the Dominican Republic. And you'd think that that would be the end of my shenanigans with addiction. But
Yeah.
after 3 months, when I was finally found innocent and released, because my father came to rescue me,
Yeah.
and Latino people do not like to see a big 6'5" man cry.
Yeah.
And in court, that's all he did. We sat there weeping. So the judge just said, innocent, innocent, get her out of here. The other two people I was caught with were not found innocent because they did not have a weeping father.
Yeah.
And they were men also.
Yeah.
So you'd think that that would be the end of my drinking, drugging years, but no.
Yeah.
I still had some more to do. But shortly thereafter, and it was 1984 by this time, George Orwell's famous 1984 year, that was the turning point in my life.
Yeah.
When I was finally confronted with the truth by some very dear friends who taped me and showed me the truth of who I really had become.
Yeah.
And I was not aware of that. So I was 36, so also in my 30s. And that was the turning point for me, when I had a reality check. So I could not deny it anymore, because people who, like me, if we were a blackout drinker and you get to a certain point, you just don't even know what you are like when you're under the influence of that poison, that toxic, brain-killing, heart-killing, soul-killing poison. And I was so shocked that I finally stopped shaking after 3 days and dragged myself to the program of recovery and begged for help. That was the beginning of my sober life, coming into the light.
What a gift they offer you, wasn't it?
Oh,
What a gift.
Yeah.
A painful gift, but it was a powerful gift.
Denial is so strong. They talk about denial being the number one symptom of addiction. This is a really graphic example of it. When my friends played the tape recording, it was a phone message.
Yeah.
And I heard this witchy voice. I said, oh, what a joke. You guys, this is really funny. Who is that? And they said, Teza, that's you. And I said, no, it's not. So they played it again, and they played it again, and they played it again, until finally there was like this curtain over my mind that just went. And finally I heard my voice. It took them playing it about 6 or 7 times. When I heard my voice, I said, oh my God, that is me. Because our mind plays tricks. And denial is actually a safeguard for many people when talk about the trauma. If we experienced it in our everyday consciousness, the trauma, it would probably make us all insane.
Yeah.
So it goes into this place called repression. And some people never can revise it again. Some people can through hypnosis. But in my case, it was just my friends being persistent. Until finally I heard. And so denial is something very much a part of addiction. If anybody's struggling with addiction, they have to look at that.
Yeah. When you took yourself into to get help, and of course that is a journey that takes time, and you began, was it at that place that you brought meditation into your life, Teza?
I had already gone through the initial, I knew before my drinking and drugging stopped, I knew I needed help. So in 1967, I was a recipient of being initiated into TM when the first wave came, but I hadn't finished with my drinking years. So I did enough meditation during 67, 68, and I knew that would be my true life, but I just couldn't walk away from my self-destructiveness, because that's the biggest addiction there is. It's people call it codependency these days, but it's got a lot to do with self-destruction, putting yourself down because you're so used to what. Maybe it could be karmic, maybe my soul came in with that, but I had been trained by my parents to put myself down, so that's what I continued to do. So that was 67 when I first had my first experience with meditation, and meditated religiously for a year. Then 1984. So what's that? That's almost 10 years, isn't it? 67. Oh, that's like long time. It was almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah.
I'm a mess. 1984, I came into recovery, and coinciding the grace of this universe brought not only recovery, but I instantly found my teacher. And I'm
Nice.
not going to disclose who my teacher is.
Yeah.
That's very private.
No,
Everybody has to
that's
find their
okay.
own teacher.
Yes, everyone has theirs, that will guide them, their guide, and that person is the person that will hold you accountable of your madness.
Yes. Holy
And all of it.
madness.
Yes. And so as you're moving through, you're going through, and you continue to go through healing as an alcoholic and someone who is um, addicted to something, because it's not just alcohol, it's other things that we are addicted to. And as you are moving through your life, Teza, and you are now going to walk in or usher yourself into your spiritual growth, where you are now becoming a true student of it, one that is going to live there, instead of one that is visiting. As you're walking towards that lifestyle, what were you thinking about as you're seeing the pull? Because it's a recognizable pull that happens to us, and we have to make a decision to, yes, this is where I need to be. How was that? How did you end up there, if you will?
Well, I had always been seeking.
Yeah.
I went through many teachers, always saying, "Move," that didn't resonate.
Yeah.
I didn't. What a bunch of crock, And you hear some teachers say, but this particular teacher, I was on the vibration, and it's a woman. Her vibration, and my vibration just, and
Yeah.
in the yogic world, we call that Shaktipat,
Yes.
where you have an instantaneous awakening.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that that's what happened. It took me a year of studying the yogic scriptures and yogic disciplines to figure out what the heck happened to me. But my Kundalini, if everybody is familiar with the Kundalini, the yearning, our spiritual life that is always dormant within us, my Kundalini was awakened spontaneously. Yeah. Although it had been up and down and all
up
around.
And down, always, yeah.
but totally awakened by just meeting the teacher. Yeah. And then it was a question of surrender. Yeah. Surrender, surrender, surrender. I just totally surrendered to it.
That piece right there, Teza. The surrender, surrender, surrender. Walk with us a little, because that is, you have to be ready for that, because that transition right there, the surrender, is one of the most powerful things you will do. But in some cases, it could be one of the scariest things you can do, because you are no longer relying on your certain abilities that you have been utilizing for many years. They are talking about the switch from the mind to the heart, where you're now being guided by the inner you, versus you're looking now into the subconscious, that one that is inside you, that is truly you. You're now going to surrender this mad mind and trust. We call it several things: instinct, the soul, all of these terminologies. But that's surrendering there. Talk to us about that, Teza, because it is necessary, but it also, for some folks, it can be very scary.
Very scary. Yeah. Well, I can talk about it. Before I surrendered to the spiritual life and living in the light, I surrendered to being an addict, which is also integral part of switching addictions from the negative to positive. Because you don't just say to an addict, "Oh, you've got to stop." your
Yeah.
addictions. You introduce
Mm-hmm.
a new healthy addiction. Could be
Mm-hmm.
just breathing
Yeah. Yeah.
or dancing or something. You have to have a new addiction. And in the recovery rooms, they encourage you to get addicted to recovery.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
addicted to those rooms. Get addicted to your new sober friends. So when I experienced surrender to my addiction, because I'm a visual person,
Yeah.
I can explain it. The first time I experienced surrender, I was in my mind. I mean, this is not all reality.
Yeah.
I was on a field, like a battlefield, like what's happening now in Gaza and Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I knew I was alive, but not really sure of it because everywhere I looked, I could peer around. I could see body parts, my own body parts,
Yeah.
an arm there, a leg there, a finger there, and other people's body parts. It was really, really an awful, horrendous destruction. And I couldn't look all around me horizontally, but I looked up and the sky was blue.
Yeah.
And I could see up there was a flag, a white flag of surrender flying. And I said, "What is that?" And I realized it was me flying my white flag of surrender. And the battlefield was my life.
Um,
And I had that strong image. I have never painted it because, Goya and,
yeah.
the masters, we've had a lot of bloodbathy paintings like
Yeah.
that. I don't focus on that in my art. All those kind of paintings I took to the dump where I'm working out the demons. Okay, so that was my first experience with surrender. But when I felt this awakening of my Kundalini,
Yeah.
it was just being transported without drugs, without any influence. And I had experienced the height of that because I forgot to mention, I was a botanical illustrator for early plant scientists, the
Mm-hmm.
fathers of ayahuasca, the fathers who studied cocaine, mushrooms, psilocybin. I was involved in all those studies at Harvard as the botanical illustrator.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew about all that from the indigenous work that we did. But I'm talking about just me in my naked body,
Yeah.
just skin and blood and guts and a soul.
Yeah.
And I was totally attuned to this vibration that was coming from the teacher because
Yeah.
the mind resonates like crystals and we pick up
Mm-hmm.
on other people's vibrations. That's why with some people we feel so comfortable with, like
Yeah.
you Ken, I feel we are kindred spirits. Other people you just stay away from because you don't want them to know
Oh,
anything
yeah.
about you.
I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
And so that surrender was
Yeah.
bliss.
Yeah.
Surrendering to bliss.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't? Who
Yeah.
wouldn't surrender to bliss?
Yeah.
I wanted just to be in bliss
Yeah.
forever. Satchidananda.
Yeah. I spent much time on an ashram. I heard earlier you mentioned I was also a student of the I Ching, the Vedas, all of those books I
Mm-hmm.
devoured because I was inquisitive about principles within the spiritual realm and how can I assimilate the wisdom from the sages into my being. And so I began to devour, if you will. I was hungry to understand. So here's this woman.
Mm-hmm.
She has been through a the history of when you talk about your life, you have gone through the history of the 60s and you're now moving through the things that you've done, Teza. Um, my God, you need to work on those books and get them all out.
Oh yeah.
Um, uh, and you now have met your teacher. You have awakened the Kundalini. You are now there, and you're learning to live in the moment. as you are there, and how did you begin to put some of those things in the notes, the books? How did that came about in writing it? And your purposeful living as you are and creating now. How did all of this begin to blossom before you?
Well, there's the journey.
Yeah.
There's the journey. That
There it
was
is.
part, what was that part 25 or part 30,000? It's just the next chapter of the
Yeah,
journey. It's not an overnight.
yeah,
It's just whatever rings my bell, I
yeah,
did. And I was blessed with great mentors and great experiences. And I got sober in New York City, by the way.
yeah,
I was, going from the Caribbean, where I
yeah,
lived for 10 years. I didn't go directly to New York City. I went to
mm,
Israel. I
yeah,
lived for a year in Israel. That's another whole
yeah,
story. When I finally get to New York City, where I had my surrender to my addictions and started meditating regularly, I was doing the dual program of the recovery of the 12 steps and
yeah,
diving into yogic practices, which I'd
yeah,
always done because
yeah,
I've done asanas for
yeah,
a bad back since I was a teenager.
yeah,
I've been a yogi, but I became much more serious yogi
yeah,
because that was my thrill, that was my bliss. And I became very much enthralled with chanting.
yeah,
I'm a big lover of chanting
mhm,
in Sanskrit or other languages, not in English.
yeah,
And the call and response that you get into with working with community and the
yeah,
energy that you get with being with other people on the same wavelength
yeah,
and sharing our adventures. And the writing and the arting just continued. And like I said, I took all the old stuff to the dump. I
yeah,
was not going to focus on any of that negative, demonic stuff. It was
yeah,
gone, wiped out.
yeah.
I actually watched people devour these paintings and things of mine. I took it to the East Hampton dump where they have like recycling tent. And oh man, I could just imagine people taking these horrible paintings and setting them up like, in their trailers or homes on top of their TVs. And
Oh
it was kind of funny. I had to see them do it. And they just like, it was like rats. And so all my work now was as a result of what is my experience in meditation? Well, it's
yeah,
elevated. My
yeah,
worldview became so expanded.
yeah,
My understanding of the connection of what is important
yeah.
became true. That doesn't mean that I was an overnight success. I
Oh
had
yeah,
many failures,
yeah,
but life really changed for me when I got married to my beautiful man. We've been
yeah,
married for 32 years now. And
yeah,
I became what I call angel mom.
yeah,
And I had to learn to nurture these two little souls that were 4 and 7, broken little souls when
yeah,
we got married. And for me, that was my art piece at the
yeah,
time, the
yeah,
performance piece of a lifetime, to
yeah,
nurture, to guide, to
yeah,
just fill with yeses to little souls that had been
yeah,
damaged by the previous bio mom, I call her.
yeah.
and
I love it, the bio mom.
and my story just went on and on. And to tell you the truth, it did not become totally healed until my biological parents left the planet.
Yeah,
I had to have that release.
yeah,
And I was with both of them as they left their bodies. I had that
hmm,
great privilege
yeah,
of accompanying them to the light. And on my mother's deathbed, she lived to be 97 and a half. I
wow,
showed her a booklet of my art, which I don't have one here. It's called We Are One. It's like my
yeah,
manifesto. It's
yeah,
art. And she looked at it and she looked at me and she looked at it and she said, "You did this?"
yeah,
Yes, mother. This is what I do.
yeah,
But she was shocked. She had no
wow,
idea. She had no idea.
Yeah.
And so that's when my real life began at the
Yeah.
age of, I don't know, that's like almost 70.
It is the deepness of you, Teza. We are so deep as individual that it will take several lifetimes for us to really get a chance to figure out who we are, because
Yeah.
um, we are we are that deep. And I tell people, you need to. My
Hmm.
heart hurts when people don't have a chance to really experience who they are, and the open themselves, as you said, to the path of surrendering. It takes some time to get there, but when you
Hmm.
arrive and you take the steps to become to surrender, what happens is that you are start ushering in yourself into the space of a servant, a true servant. Because a servant has to surrender all of their understanding and allow their um, inner being to become the one that is walking with them. This body and my mind is just instruments that is used by me inside. But I have to surrender that and allow my inner being to be real, to be out there and experience life. That's when we start living, I tell people. And so,
True.
you guys that are
Hmm.
listening to us,
Hmm.
I have someone that has been there. When you listen to her story from, all of the history of so many different movements she was a part of, the front line. I have someone, guys, that you can get into her space, her books. Those books, and I tell people, are private conversation between you and her. People pay thousands of dollars to get a private interaction with teachers all over. And you can get that for the price of a book. When you sit down, find your comfort. And when you find your comfort, what happens is your mind is going into a theta state. It's a state that you put yourself in. And when you put yourself in that state and you read those words, they have the ability to leap from that and become a living organism within your living organism and change you forever. And I want to welcome you guys. I'm going to provide everything for you to get access to her. She does much more, but I want you guys to get into her space. Get wisdom, it will change your life. Get understanding, it will encourage you. Get knowledge, it will hug you, kiss you, and give birth to some powerful being of who you are. I have someone that is before us that is acquainted with all of them, and she will guide you into your space. Teza, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. I have been, uh, parts of me have been awakened to the power that is you and the history that you have brought into my life. I am honored.
It is mutual. Thank you so much. And I just want to send love to everybody, especially anybody who feels they need love. And I
Yeah,
awaken every morning and just make a little conduit between the divine and myself. And I just say, use
yeah.
me, direct me. And my life is not mine. It is the sacred's.
The language of a servant, Teza.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and I try to educate people. Servants, when you look at them, you think that they are weak. They are the true warriors, are the servants, because
Yes.
they have gone through. They are true, powerful warriors. And because of their knowledge understanding, insights, and wisdom. They will guide you through minefields that you are not even aware that are there, because they are warriors. And I'm watching one of the most powerful ones I've ever seen in a while. Thank you.
It's been a privilege, and I just want to say one thing too, that it's very
Yeah.
important to keep a sense of humor throughout this
Oh,
whole
yeah.
journey. And I value people's humor and their connection with joy. It's not a serious
Yes.
thing to be a servant or to be a lover of the
No.
divine. It's a very joyous, blissful gift.
Yeah. I dance all over the place. I'm
Yeah.
telling you,
Let's
Teza,
dance.
I'm constantly dancing and expressing love and gratitude. One must always be in a state of gratitude. Gratitude is just beautiful. Meditation with gratitude, some of the most powerful tools you will ever bring into your life to make a difference in you. And I'm telling you guys, you need to bring those two in, meditation and gratitude. You'll see how you will change, and you will change um, just powerfully. You'll be amazed at how the rate that it takes place. Trust me, I'm telling you. You
Put
know,
some gratitude in your attitude.
yeah, there you go. Thank you so much, Tessa.
Okay. Have a
Bye bye.
beautiful, blessed moment.
You too.